All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. A lot of news happening, of course, with the Dallas Cowboys, with every NFL team. We're seeing some roster cuts, some strategic decisions here and there, including one massive decision by the Dallas Cowboys. Without further ado, no stat of the day today. There's too much going on. Let's get into news. And the biggest storyline of the day, in my opinion, is what the Cowboys have done with rookie running back Phil Mafah. This is courtesy of Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. The Cowboys will place rookie running back Phil Mafah with a shoulder on injured reserve per sources. The plan is for him to return during the season. Mafah had 15 carries for 59 yards and one touchdown in the preseason. All right, there's a couple different ways to take this, right? Mafah did have some shoulder injuries in college, so there's concerns now. It's like, okay, is that flaring up? One of the reasons he fell in the draft was that injury concern. Is this becoming a problem for the Cowboys? Is this a classic stash a player on injured reserve so that way he doesn't hit the practice squad? It feels more like the latter. I think Mafah was a guy they really like. Obviously, he did some good things in the preseason, got a lot of touches in camp, even some repetitions with the first string. But the reality is, week one, if they wanted him on their active 53, they would have had two rookie running backs, Jaden Blue obviously being one of them, Phil Mafah being the second. Two rookie running backs to make up your running back room, non-ideal situation. So you would end up probably with Javonte Williams, Mafah, and Jaden Blue, two rookies, pass protection issues, things like that. Mental mistakes, not ideal, especially when you're dealing with an offensive line that already has a rookie and an offensive tackle and guy going into a second year, BB second year. So younger group front, offensive line wise anyway. Now you throw a couple rookies in the running back room, some potential early season problems. The solution, stash one rookie running back, Phil Mafah, on injured reserve. And look, I'm not saying the Cowboys are lying. His shoulder probably does hurt. He probably has some pain there. Let him sit on injured reserve for a few weeks. Let him get more mentally ready. Let's see how Sanders, let's see how Williams, and let's see how Blue does. And then look, when things go maybe not so great with one of those running backs come October timeframe, elevate Phil Mafah. He'll be better, right? His shoulder will be 100% fully healed by then, of course. This, again, classic move. Every team does something like this. I think the Cowboys are just stashing him on the roster in terms of injured reserve. Because remember, even if they put him on the practice squad, he could be picked up by anybody else. That's how the practice squad works. I think the Dallas Cowboys really like Phil Mafah, but they want to save a roster spot, and they're worried that if he sits on the practice squad, he'll be picked up. So they just stash him on injured reserve for a little while. So again, smart move here by Dallas. I think that this is a good sign for Phil Mafah. I'm actually going to expect him to get actually a good healthy amount of carries come the regular season, the second half of the season, most likely. I think they're going to elevate him probably October timeframe and let him be there for the second half, the stretch run post Thanksgiving, get some touches, short yardage, goal line. I think he likely replaces Sanders on the roster at that time, depending on injuries. But it's very clear based on this report, the Cowboys like Phil Mafah. They don't like him enough to take over, let's say, Sanders' spot early on as a rookie running back, but they definitely want to avoid him going somewhere else. So you stash him on injured reserve. Makes sense. All right, next report here. This is courtesy of Tommy Yarish, good Cowboys reporter, just highlighting the first wave of Cowboys cuts. Wave, Nick Broker, Denzel Daxon, Josh Kelly, Tyler Neville, Troy Pride Jr., that's a big one, and John Stevens Jr. Lyle Collins was released, mentioned that yesterday, and then waived due to injury was Christian Matthew. So the big one there is Troy Pride Jr., right? The outside corner situation has been pretty much clearly defined at this point. I talked about yesterday that the Cowboys had a couple options. They either go keeping Troy Pride Jr. and they cut Keeman Hall and they're going to move Deron Bland inside once Diggs gets healthy, or they're going to keep Keeman Hall and they're going to cut Troy Pride Jr. and keep Deron Bland on the outside. And this move speaks for itself right here. They're cutting Troy Pride, so that means Diggs and Bland will be the outside corners most likely, with Elam, of course, being the backup there, or the key backup among those two. And then when you look at the slot corner, it's very clear they're high on Hall and Childress right now. That's become obvious. They like those two guys. We'll have to see how the final cuts go, but I think one of those two, or both of those guys, or maybe Mukuamu getting some reps there as well. I think it's clear the Cowboys like their inside slot corner position, what they've seen, Childress, Hall, more than they like Troy Pride Jr., and they made that very clear with this move right here. I think that's the big takeaway here. John Stevens Jr., I think a lot of flashes. Some people are really high on him, but the tight end room is just too deep, all right, in terms of Princeton fans, a great blocker, right? I love Brevin Spanford, who's another good blocker. Of course, Ferguson got the big deal. There's going to be a lot of question marks going forward with the Dallas Cowboys in terms of what's going to happen with Schoonmaker. Maybe he's going to get cut this offseason or this training camp cycle. Who knows? But the reality is there's just too many bodies at tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. Doesn't make sense to keep Stevens. All right, moving on to the next report here. This is from Joseph Hoyt. This is kind of a funny little social media thing. So the bottom half there was his original tweet. Then he replied to that tweet, and then he reposted his reply. So Hoyt here going all in on the engagement here, trying to get make sure everyone sees this, right? So his first post was Tyler Guyton returned to practice Tuesday for the Cowboys, encouraging sign for an early return, potentially for week 1 against the Eagles in 10 days. That is good. Tyler Guyton on his return to the field. I'm feeling blessed. I'm just happy to be out there. Guyton did only individual work, he said, so individual drills. That's working with the O-line. He didn't do any team period kind of stuff. Still a good step forward. As for playing in week 1, potentially, he said, we're monitoring it, but I'm going to leave it up to the training staff. So it's going to be close, right? The fact that he's doing individual work right now is obviously a very good sign, considering we have I'm filming this Tuesday, so we got 9 days until they play Philadelphia. So he seems to be trending in the right direction. It'll come down to, again, like he mentions here, particular evaluations from the training staff. In years past, the Cowboys training staff has, to be totally honest, been kind of on the later side of things in terms of players returning. So I'm still not expecting Guyton to play week 1, but he's trending in the right direction. He put in the work in rehab. Obviously, a good sign for the Cowboys. He'll definitely, barring something completely unforeseen, be ready for week 2, if not for week 1 against Philadelphia. Good news there. All right, next report. This is also from Joseph Hoyt. He posted, Cowboys tight end Brevin Spanford and rookie running back Jaden Blue were both participating lightly in today's Cowboys practice. The injury with Jaden Blue, I think when he hurt his ankle in the final preseason game, there were some concerns that a high ankle sprain or something like that. He's going to be out 6 weeks. He seems highly likely to play week 1. A little bit more likely than Guyton, but still up in the air a little bit. I think he probably does play. And even if he doesn't play, you still have 2 veteran running backs in Sanders, and of course, and you have Williams. And if you got to play Deuce Vaughn as your emergency running back for 1 game, worse things have happened in the National Football League, but I think he will be ready. The reports seem to indicate that he's trending in that direction. Obviously, he's not going to get a lot of touches. They may kind of keep him on a little bit of a pitch count, but it's not a serious injury. Definitely a week-to-week thing. If he's not ready for week 1, most likely week 2, which, depending on how things go, that may make more sense just to say, hey, listen, if you're not 100%, first game, road game, Philadelphia, good defense, maybe rest that ankle a little bit, be ready for week 2. I don't hate that approach, but again, if he's ready, you got to play him. I'm not saying sit him if he is ready, but if it's a 50-50 thing, I'd probably lean towards sitting him, roll with Williams, roll with Sanders, have Deuce Vaughn be the emergency third stringer guy, and then you can work from there. That's my thought based on how things sit, but if he is ready, I think you should play him, and it's a good sign that he's working through some practice, lightly practicing, if that. And Brevin Spanford practicing is a guy I'm really high on. I think he's a really good blocker, versatile player, played a lot more down the stretch. People remember the Cowboys' good rushing performances in the second half of the season. He was a big part of that with his blocking. I think him and Ferguson as part of that 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, I think that's a powerful weapon. I think Spanford's a really good blocker. I think him getting back into the fold is really key. I don't know if he'll be ready for week 1. I don't know if he'll need more reps or more timing. We'll have to see in terms of getting ready for the offense. But I'm excited to see what he does this year when he's healthy. Brevin Spanford, I think he's an underrated player. All right, this next report here is courtesy of Tommy Yarish. Some really good news here. Back at practice, Cowboys cornerback Trayvon Diggs is aiming to play week 1, right? Originally it was supposed to be back by hopefully October. Now it's week 1, potentially. Good news there. If everything feels good in the next 10 days leading up to it. Physically, I don't have any limitations. So again, sort of like Guyton, it's going to depend on training staff, coaching staff. Can he get up to game speed, game conditioning? I think that's the biggest concern right now is he's working through practice. He's back at practice, going full speed, working through individual drills, things like that. Obviously, non-padded practice yesterday. So the question with Diggs is, can he be 100% good to go, game speed, game ready over the course of the next week, week and a half, without any hiccups, without any disturbances, things like that. I mean, there's a chance he could play week 1, which would be a huge win for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think this is a bigger chance than people understand. It goes back to the Troy Pride release earlier that I mentioned, that the fact that means they're very high on, for example, Zion Childress. But I also think it means they're betting that Diggs will be back no later than week 2 and maybe week 1. I don't think you make that move. You release an outside corner who had a pretty good preseason, all things considering. I don't know all the details of how he did, in the meeting room and things like that. But based on all reporting that we had and what we saw, Pride was certainly fine, certainly was solid for what he did for the Dallas Cowboys this cycle. But I don't think you release him unless you believe Trayvon Diggs will be ready very early in the season. And I think the trend has been Diggs' friend so far. And if he's ready week 1, what a win for the Dallas Cowboys to have their 2 starting outside corners ready against the Philadelphia Eagles. Guyton potentially ready too. I mean, obviously there's some other injuries. Blue, right? There's a chance. I think if I was a betting man, I would say Blue, Guyton, and Diggs, all 3 don't play. But there's a better than 0% chance, a much larger than 0% chance that all 3 of them play. And if they do, that's a big win for Dallas just to start the season off with a lot of their pieces intact. even if they don't play week 2, right? Again, we talked about the Diggs injury. There was concern Blue was a high ankle sprain. How bad was Guyton? Originally, people thought Guyton tore his ACL. If we go into this season, if you would ask me a month ago, hey, week 2, you're going to have Diggs back, Guyton back, and Blue ready, I would have said, yeah, I will take that 100 times out of 100. And that seems to be the most likely case here. And there's even a strong case that some of these guys, like Guyton, like Diggs here, will be ready against Philadelphia. Again, more great news for the Dallas Cowboys. One of the reasons why I think you don't play your starters during the preseason games is it allows guys like Diggs, these veterans, that when they get a little banged up or when they're fighting through injuries, they're not trying to also prepare for a game. They're also trying to get some game reps in. They get to focus solely on rehab and preparation, which Diggs, to his credit, has done a great job. Seems to be ahead of schedule. We'll have to track it to see how it goes, but outstanding news here. Good leadership here, good work ethic here from the Cowboys corner. All right, let's get into some interesting reporting here that I saw on social media. Let's pull up this first one here. This is from Dan Graziano, ESPN. He's a really good reporter, been around a long time. I really trust what he says. And this has to do with the Micah Parsons contract situation. So a lot of people have said that Jerry Jones violated the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, by negotiating, directly with Micah Parsons instead of with Micah Parsons' agent. But here's what Graziano had to say about this. And I trust Graziano, again, really good reporter. He said, thing about this is, I don't see how what Jerry is doing is a CBA violation. I get why it feels like one, sure. But while the CBA says you can't negotiate with an agent who isn't NFLPA certified, NFL Player Association certified, it doesn't say you can't negotiate with the player. So I've asked this question a bunch, right? There's been a lot of people, in the media space, TV and online saying Jerry Jones negotiating with Micah Parsons was a CBA violation. That was a violation. But Graziano is saying here, and I trust Graziano, he's a good reporter. It doesn't mean he's 100% correct here. So there's a fact check. Please throw it down there in the comment section. But this kind of has what I've been saying too mixed in here is, listen, the CBA says if there's an agent, he has to be certified. But there doesn't have to be an agent. Right? You can always negotiate with the player. You can't restrict a player from representing himself. You can, like in a legal case, I'm assuming in a courtroom, right? If a guy wants to defend himself, the judge says, maybe you shouldn't do that, right? That's not a good idea, but I'm not going to compel you to not do that. And I think that's what the CBA basically has written here. And again, Micah Parsons doing that in turn negotiation as himself, whether he was strong-armed into it in an awkward situation with Jerry Jones, that's all fair talking points. We've talked about that a lot, but the reality is that's not a violation. And I think we're starting to see, as more information trickles out here, that it's clear the Parsons-Mulligetta camp, and I blame more Mulligetta than Parsons at this point, seems to be more in the wrong. Not that Jerry Jones is 100% in the right at all. I think he's made a ton of mistakes. I think he took the wrong approach in a couple different avenues, which we've covered over the past few weeks. But I think as more information trickles out, it looks like a lot more of what happened here is Parsons and Mulligetta making mistakes. All right, next report here. Let's pull this up. This is courtesy of Bill Barnwell. So the Eagles have been active, and I talked about Howie Roseman, the Eagles, a little bit yesterday, and I was talking about how Roseman seems to like making deals for deals' sake, right? He does a lot of good deals and a lot of good trades, and he gets a lot of hype in the media for that. And he's a very good GM, obviously, but sometimes he makes moves that are very befuddling, and he just likes making moves just to do them. And this is an example. This is a post from Bill Barnwell talking about the sequence of events here in Philly for this specific situation. The Eagles trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson and a 6th-round pick to the Texans for Kenyon Green and a 5th-rounder. Then the Eagles trade Harrison Bryant to the Texans for John Mechie and undo that pick swap, and then the Eagles cut Green. So if you follow everything that happened there, is that the Eagles kind of just swam in circles here. They didn't really do anything, right? They've got Kenyon Green, and then they cut him. They lost the starting corner. They undid a pick swap. And they ended up with Mechie for Harrison Bryant. They already have like 3 good receivers. John Mechie hasn't done anything in Houston. So they basically ended up maybe about the same, maybe a little bit worse, right? I mean, there's some obviously salary cap constraints that have to be considered here. But I think this is what happens when you have a GM like Howie Roseman. He makes a lot of deals, makes a lot of moves, and some of them get a lot of attention and a lot of publicity. And when they work out, you get all the applause, right? Oh, this is great. But then you get weird stuff, right? You get a GM that has to justify his own existence. He's known as a wheeler dealer, so he's always got to be wheeling and dealing here. And this is sort of the anti-Jones family, right? And I think the perfect middle ground is literally in the middle ground between these two. You don't want to make deals for deals' sake, right? Right now, I think the Eagles are riding high because of obviously winning the Super Bowl. They're a very talented team, and Roseman feels like whatever he touches turns to gold. But I think he's making some mistakes here. I think he's just spending time and calories away from what could be actually helping Philadelphia. Now, I think this is good news for Dallas, the fact that Philly is spending their time making bad moves. But I think it's important to understand when people say Jerry Jones needs to hire a real general manager, needs to hire an experienced GM, This is what you get with a real GM sometimes. Just a guy, again, because he's trying to impress the boss, trying to impress the owner, trying to get the media attention. He's just making moves just to make moves. It's not helping his team. The one good news about having Jerry Jones and the Jones family as the GM side of things, as being the GM for the Dallas Cowboys, is the only guy he has to impress is himself, which he already does automatically because it's Jerry Jones. So he doesn't have to worry about impressing the boss because he is the boss. That is one sort of minor benefit for the Cowboys-Jones situation. Now, I do think there's been a lot of Jerry Jones moves, and we've talked about it a lot. We don't have to go into all of them that were far from ideal. But to reminder here for Dallas Cowboys fans that want a quote-unquote real GM, this is sometimes what you get with one of those real GMs. All right, and finally here, we've got an interesting post from Mark Schlereth. He said, I think on some kind of podcast, I guess a Dan Patrick show, talking about the Dallas Cowboys, they are the Jacksonville Jaguars with better marketing. So I wanted to bring this up because this was a theme I've seen around the internet and in the media going back a couple of years now. And it sort of started a little bit with Dak Prescott. I was talking to someone the other day, just a little while ago actually, and he said, well, Dak Prescott, he's sort of like Sam Darnold, right? He's an okay starter, but you're always looking to replace him. And I heard this guy, I'm like, this guy's a football fan. Like, he watches football. I'm like, what are you talking about, right? What is going on? What do you mean? And he lives very online. He's a very social media guy on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, or X or whatever the kids call it these days. And it's like there's a narrative, there's a meme when it comes to Dallas and Dak Prescott that he's not very good. Dak Prescott was an MVP finalist 2 years ago. Dak Prescott has had multiple division titles. We're talking about 4 division titles in his career. Do I have that right? 16, 18, 21, and 23, right? Sam Darnold has, I think, 1. And it was last year, if I remember correctly. He's been a backup a number of times. He's been benched like 4 or 5 times. Prescott's never been benched. Right? If you look at the raw numbers and analytics, it's not even close. Prescott blows Sam Darnold out of the water. Wins, losses, it's not even close. But this guy, because of what was going on in the media and because so many people like to hate on Dallas just because it's Dallas, somehow had this belief that Darnold, again, a borderline not starter in the NFL, a starter / backup in the NFL, leaning more towards backup for a good team, is just as good as Dak Prescott, an all-pro, Pro Bowl quarterback, a tier 2 quarterback, tier 2, tier 3 quarterback, depending on how you rank it. And that just blew me away. And that's what made me think of Schlereth's comments right here. The Jacksonville Jaguars have been terrible. 3 times in the past 5 years, they've had a top 5 pick. They were the worst team in football back-to-back seasons, right? They were terrible last season. They've had 1 12-win season, 1 in 20 years. That was 2005. And they promptly lost to the New England Patriots in the playoffs in the very first round, right? They had 1 magical season, I believe in 17, if I remember correctly, where they made a magical run in the postseason before losing to the Patriots again. But outside of that, I mean, they had that 1 comeback against the Chargers, I think in 21, maybe 21, 22, around that time frame. And that's it. I think 22. So again, you're talking about over the course of 20 years, you had 1 good season that ended in disappointment, a magical run that ended in disappointment, and a decent season in a weak division where you had a good comeback in the wild card round before losing in divisional. That's it for 3 years. And mixed into that is nothing but terrible. 4 wins, 5 wins, 3 wins, 2 wins, 1 win. I mean, they've had 3 okay seasons, 3 solid seasons, and 17 of just bad. If you look at the wins between Cowboys and Jacksonville over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, take whatever interval you want, significantly more. Playoff wins, more for Dallas. As much as that's hard to believe, the Cowboys actually have more playoff wins over that same 20-year time period. Not by a lot, right? But they have more playoff wins. As crazy as that sounds, as bad as Dallas has been in the postseason. Division titles, not even close. Pro Bowlers, not even close. All pros, not even close, right? In terms of toughness of division, really the past 10 years, NFC East significantly harder than the AFC South. Certainly over the last 5. The AFC South has been a joke the last 5 years, and the Jacksonville Jaguars have been the biggest butt of that joke. And I'm not trying to pick on Jacksonville here. I'm just picking on what Schlereth is saying here. And I like Mark Schlereth. I think he's a good talking head. I think he does a lot of good stuff. But I think there's this, going back to my Dak Prescott, Sam Darnold thing, because the Cowboys get hit on a lot with in terms of disappointment. Oh, they lost in the playoffs again, or oh, they blew a lead again, or oh, they didn't make the Super Bowl again. It sets this barometer of like, oh, they're as bad as the worst teams in football. No, they're not, right? That's this bonkers thing. There is no metric over the past 20 years when you can look at Dallas and say they're bad. You can say they're okay to solid. You can say they're definitely not good. They're definitely not great. And that's 100% fair. But to sit there and say they're as bad as one of the worst franchises in football is just wrong. It's just a categorical error. It's a falsity. And I just don't understand where people get this in their head. I think it's an online thing. I think there's a lot of memes. People like crapping on Dallas. Oh, Dallas is terrible. Dallas is the worst, right? Folks, they went 7-10 last year, and the world was on fire, right? It was like, what is wrong with Dallas? What an embarrassment. Right? There were people saying that the Cowboys are an embarrassment. With all their injuries, they won 7 games. They went 7-10, right? That's more than the San Francisco 49ers, right? That's more than a lot of teams. And right here, what we've seen from the Dallas Cowboys is more and more just stupidity from the media, okay? And I don't know where it's coming from. I think it's because of people being terminally online, but it's just false. It's just a categorical error. It's probably not going away anytime soon, but I feel like we need to call this out here when it happens, because it's just wrong. It's just bad, just media interviews, whatever you want to call it. Just bad football from Mark Schlereth here. All right, that's my little rant on that. It happens every once in a while, and I just don't get it, guys. It comes from a very weird place. I think it's just people live too much online. All right, let's get into the comments from yesterday. Terrence Liebert, 8655, talking about the find of the offseason here, talking about training camp and the preseason. He commented, James Houston is the find. And member Robert Bass, 3667, said total agreement. Yeah, James Houston is an interesting player who had a really good preseason. It seems like he's likely to make the roster, but it's not a guarantee. He seems to be a bubble guy. The question is, what can he do in terms of against better competition? What has he been doing in practice? I think there's a decent chance he makes the roster. The problem is the one position where the Cowboys have enough players is defensive end, right? Parsons, Fowler, Williams, Ezeraku, right? You already have a lot of guys there. Do you go super heavy? I mean, how many snaps can he play with that position group? It's a tough call to make, but he has had a great preseason, undeniably so. All right, Jared, 4336 commented, we need an upgrade at one technique with an exclamation point. Yeah, that is 100% in agreement. That is true. One technique is quite bad for Dallas, and is and will be a problem this season, undeniably so. All right, this is from Bobby Demand. He said, my point was Mozzie, talking about Mozzie Smith, didn't do anything else noticeable other than that one play, talking about that tackle for loss against Atlanta. However, I'm not opposed to him being on the roster as a number 5 or so DT. Osa, Solomon Thomas, and Ernest Brown IV seem like locks. I personally like Perrion Winfrey and Jay Toya better than Mozzie, so I have Mozzie at number 6, defensive tackle, to be honest. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I like Mozzie Smith as a backup. The problem is, how good is Toya? Is Toya developing? I mentioned this yesterday. Is he trending up? If he's getting better, play more of him. Same thing with Winfrey. Is he, right, his PFF grades are bad, Winfrey's, but is he disruptive enough? Is he consistent enough? If he is, play him, right? But if those guys aren't, and they're really struggling too, just across the board, and Toya isn't developing, he's kind of flatlining, you may be stuck playing Mozzie Smith. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it, but that's just the reality here for the Dallas Cowboys. All right. This is also from Bobby DeMantos, another comment out there. He said, we have to remember we have 4-year contracts on our draft picks, whereas many others are a 1-year deal or in the last year of their contracts. This does matter, especially when we are so top-heavy on the cap. I feel like this will give Maffa, Toye, Ajani Cornelius, and others a leg up against competition on 1-year or last year contracts. Yeah, it is an interesting point in terms of the duration of a rookie deal, right? Obviously, if you're a 5th-round pick or a 7th-round pick or whatever, you're going to sign that 4-year deal, whereas if you're a 1-year veteran or something like that, then it's a completely different mindset. I do think that does give them a little bit of an advantage. You also understand that veterans, as a league minimum, get paid more, right? It's a sliding scale once you become vested in the National Football League. So being a top-heavy roster, that does factor into the calculus. I do think you bring up a great point. That's a really good comment right there, because understanding why rookies and late rounders may make this team and may play is just a function of the dollars that have to be allocated to pay Prescott, Lamb, Diggs, Tyler Smith in the future, Ferguson, Micah Parsons in the future, things like that, hopefully near future with Parsons. But that's a really good comment there. Thank you. Glenart101 commented, excellent commentary regarding the Micah Parsons contract negotiation. Micah has little leverage. Yeah, I mean, the more that comes out, it just looks worse and worse from Parsons from a negotiation leverage perspective. He seems to be, him and his camp, it's mainly David Mulligette's agent, but mainly his camp seems to not be in a very strong position right now and getting weaker. All right, this next comment is from Steven Vanover, regular commenter. Love to see that. Final cuts is NFL Jenga. Bottom roster guys are not competing versus their positional depth chart. Instead, they compete against the entire Cowboys roster and the entire just released NFL free agents pool. As has been explained here, the final 53 is anything but, and the actual cut date is not the end, rather a beginning. That's a very good point, right? Players get cut and they pass through waivers, make a practice squad, get elevated. I mean, you had Butler, the corner last year, for example. He was a practice squad guy who got bounced around, ended up starting for the Dallas Cowboys against Washington, and I think in the Thanksgiving game too, before he got hurt, was starting. So again, you're talking about a guy that wasn't anywhere remotely close to the final 53 last year and ends up starting games for the Dallas Cowboys. Again, part of that was injuries, of course, with what Dallas had to go through defensively, but that's a good comment and a good point, right? What we see here is sort of I'll call it like this. I'll take your words and put a little twist on it. It's the end of the beginning, right? And then we're going to see actually get into the regular part of the season and managing the roster. So it's the end of the training camp off-season phase of roster development and roster management. Now it's about regular season roster management. That's what starts after, I believe, this afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern, when teams have to hit their final 53. All right, this is from Finster3386. They released Collins so early, talking about Lyle Collins. I have to assume he really wants to play and they're giving him a chance to find another team. It'll be interesting to see if they feel he is worth a practice squad spot and if he's willing to be on the practice squad. He's made money, so he may not need to play if he didn't blow it all. LOL, hard to criticize anything Roseman does. He has the most talented roster in the NFL by no small margin and is winning Super Bowls. I wouldn't be comparing anything that Jones is doing to what Roseman is doing in a positive way. From all reports, Mozzie has the same problem he had as a rookie. He's incredibly slow off the ball. So 3 points there to tackle. The Lionel Collins early release, well, you have to understand veterans, when they get released in training camp, they don't have to go through waivers. So you can release them at any point. One of the reasons why teams like to wait is they don't want to, if they got a player they want to try and pick up after waivers, they kind of want to see what other teams do, a little gamesmanship there, right? They want to say, okay, we want to waive this guy and hopefully maybe no one picks him up, kind of lose him in the shuffle. If a veteran like Collins gets cut, right, he doesn't go through the waiver wire. He's immediately an unrestricted free agent. He can go through any team he wants, right? So the waiver wire, for anyone who isn't familiar, there's an order of teams that has the right of first refusal. So the Tennessee Titans last year, they have first dibs on the waiver wire. So when a player gets waived, let's say Matthew, I think the corner, got waived for the Dallas Cowboys, using him as an example. Stevens got waived, the tight end, that's a better example, is that the Tennessee Titans will look at him and say, all right, do I want him or not? No. Okay, then we'll go to the next worst team, and then the next worst team. And they all have right of first refusal until it works its way back around, right? And as you go through the entire waiver wire, if everyone refuses, then you become basically an unrestricted free agent. So there's a different level of gamesmanship versus cutting a player like Collins and waiving just a rookie or a player that can be waived based on their contract situation and their tenure with the National Football League. So it's a little more complex than just, hey, cutting a player. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to, but there is some intricacies and some gamesmanship there. When it comes to criticizing Howie Roseman, look, he's been obviously a great GM. I'm not saying anything against him in terms of the overall product, but it is one of the downsides that can happen, right, when you have a GM who's just a GM. You get a lot of great trades, but sometimes you get a lot of weird ones. Same thing with coaches, right? You have a great coach that's won you a lot of games, but every once in a while he does a lot of weird things, right? And that's just part and parcel of the process, right? And I think that's one thing that the Cowboys don't have to worry about, and it's sort of the one, I'll say the biggest positive, and it's not a very big one, with having Jones be the GM, is he doesn't have to worry about impressing the boss or keeping his job because he's the owner, right? He controls that no matter what. All right, this is from Robert Bass, 3667, again, a member, so I'll give him another shout out. If you want to get the preferential comment, you get, if you're a member, you're going to get I'm going to reply to every single one of the comments you make. I'm going to shout you out every single time. So become a member to support us, support this channel. Really appreciate it. Big shout out to Robert Bass for being a member here. He commented, Mr. Brian Broaddus said he heard from his contacts in the building that Phil Maffa won't make the team due to a shoulder injury that carried over from college, but Broaddus has in the past just made claims that did not pan out. What is your view on Maffa making the 53? Well, that was answered yesterday afternoon, yesterday evening. So it sounds like Brian Broaddus got this correctly. He won't make the 53. But it feels like the shoulder, my opinion here, is sort of, now don't get me wrong, I think it's probably dinged up. But I still, like I mentioned before, I think it's an excuse to stash him for a month or two because they don't have two rookie running backs on the active 53, the final 53, the first final 53. I think there's a little gamesmanship here for the Dallas Cowboys. I think he'll end up playing this season. I think barring something I'm not seeing right now, he's going to become a player for the Cowboys and get actual live game reps sometime during the 2025 campaign. All right, that's enough of the comments for today. A lot of interesting things are going to happen over the next 24 hours. A lot of players move, a lot of things to keep an eye on, a lot of news. Can't wait to talk with you guys about it tomorrow as we get closer to week 1 against Philadelphia. Football is almost finally back. Exciting time. Until tomorrow, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.